Horizon Chance, and this is Church Compass of Christian Denomination by Redeem Zoomer. Yes, I would start reacting to Redeem Zoomer for like Christian related like videos. It's really interesting. This is the only channel I come across. It's like gives you like this brief summary analysis type of thing. I like his like denomination videos the most, and this is about compass. Now, first I'm like, what the hell does that mean, compass? But then I saw this like literally first image is like conservative, liberal, high church, low church. So I'm assuming like which churches have which kind of values when it comes to like a political spectrum, and high and low, I guess, like how strong in their belief they are. This is really interesting video because there's like way too many denominations talked about, like which one are which. I'm gonna think Orthodox are going to be like one of the most like devoted one, at least with all the images I've seen. Right now, are they conservative or liberal? I'm guessing they're conservative because like mostly in Russia, isn't it? So they're supposed to be conservative. I don't know, but this is going to be interesting video. This is the type of video I expect from Redeem Zoomer. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I already did other like Redeem Zoomer video, like some of them like about denomination mostly, and also like all religion explained in this minute, like Bill Woods type of video, which is good as well. So yeah, that's what this one. Remember, if you like my Rickson, don't forget to subscribe. Check out the Rickson. This is a link in the description. Check out the end cards for whatever YouTube throws at you, I guess. Yeah, that's what's it.
I'm going to introduce you to the church compass. It's like the political compass, but not political and for church. I invented it in high school, mostly while doodling on my homework
High
instead
school.
of, doing my homework, because I had just converted to Christianity and I was looking at all the different kinds of churches, all the different denominations. I noticed some churches were very liberal, some were very conservative, some were very traditional, and some were very anti-traditional.
Back the
Doing my
fuck off.
homework, because I had just converted to Christianity and I was looking at all the different kinds of churches, all the different denominations. I noticed some churches were very liberal.
Is that a rainbow? How does church and pride go together? I never understood that. Like, isn't like one of the churches thing about Jesus that like they, how does that align, right? I'm pretty sure there's a rainbow, so they're like liberal, leftist rainbow. I'm guessing pride related. How does church Christianity in that? I guess it's one of the videos you talked about, like some of the churches, liberal churches, has nothing to do with the Christianity. But at that point, like, why does it like even call it a church? Just call it like a community center. Because at that point, like Christianity is the whole religion. It's about Christ and Christianity. If you're no longer representing that, like, what are you doing? Just call it community center. Like, why do we need the word Christianity at that point?
Some were very conservative, some were very traditional, and some were very anti-traditional. And in this context,
There you go.
liberal and
That's
conservative
Orthodox,
don't
right?
necessarily mean anything political. Theologically liberal just means they're less strict about the beliefs of their religion, and conservative means they're more strict about their beliefs. And
That's what it
high
means.
church
Yeah.
is what we call churches where the church itself and its traditions has more authority.
More
And low church
authority.
means it's less about the church and tradition and more about your own personal relationship with God and personal interpretation of the Bible. So I noticed you could put all the major Christian traditions.
Wait a minute. Look at the Orthodox top. I knew it. Like high church probably just means that, like tradition, authority. I didn't know that. So Catholic would be there close to it because authority. Like who has like like Christianity? Pope represent the whole Christianity for the world, basically. Then people realize that wait a minute, Catholic is different than all other denomination. Most people just like, oh look at that Pope, Christian, same thing, right? So then Pope is must be like king of Christian or something. Most people who don't know about Christianity would think that. Even I didn't know that. Like okay, and then somebody's like, oh wait a minute, that's different. I'm like, what? What do you mean by different? And then like, oh my god, too many denominations. Then I watched Redeem Zoom and I'm like, okay, that's not too many. There's way too many. Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, okay. I get Presbyterian. I think that's what Redeem Zoomer is, right? Okay. So what about liberal and conservative though?
On a scale
Where they
from
are?
low church to high church. Approximately, there is some overlap, but you will find liberals and conservatives within all of these branches. So it's not like Methodists are liberal and Baptists are conservative. You'll really find both conservatives and liberals within both of those traditions, within all of them. So really the y-axis determines what branch of Christianity you'll be part of, and the x-axis determines how liberal or conservative you'll be within that branch. And here's how I ranked them. So all the churches above this line practice infant baptism, whereas the churches below this line, Baptists and non-denominationals, well really non-denominationals are just Baptists but with a smoke machine.
Is that non-denomination? Like, what the fuck does that mean? What is non-denomination? There are like just like I don't associate with any other. Like I'm just point blank Christian. Is that what the case is? Like I just believe in the Bible. That's it. The end. Like, I don't care about anything else. Like, that are even, I didn't know that.
Baptist with a lowercase b. Those churches below this line do not practice infant baptism because they think being a Christian is purely a personal individual choice. And that makes sense being more low church, it's more about a personal relationship. Whereas above this line, infant baptism shows that being a Christian isn't purely a personal decision, but also being part of the broader family of God, being part of the church. So you can see why practicing infant baptism makes a church a bit more high church than a church that does not practice infant baptism. So all the churches above this line believe that Jesus Christ is physically present in the Lord's Supper. Now, it's not like the churches below this line think the Lord's Supper is just a symbol. All the churches between these two lines, the ones that practice infant baptism but don't believe Jesus is physically present in the Lord's Supper, still would affirm a kind of spiritual real presence of Christ in the Lord's Supper. So we're
Yeah,
talking like
overlapping.
Presbyterians, Methodists, Congregationalists, all of them still do affirm that we really receive the body and blood of Christ, but it's more of a spiritual thing. They wouldn't say the bread and wine actually change. But generally speaking, the churches above this line believe in either transubstantiation or physical real presence or consubstantiation, whatever you want to call it. They believe that the presence of Christ in the Lord's Supper is something physical. I've heard some Lutherans try
Mm.
and explain that their view isn't exactly physical real presence, but for simplicity's sake, we're going to say that all the churches above this line, Lutherans, most Anglicans, Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and I'm going to include the Oriental Orthodox later, just it would crowd out the chart too much if I include them now. They all
You would think Catholic might not be one of them, right? Like, okay, Anglican, Lutheran, Orthodox. Even though Orthodox is like big, like everybody knows, like the Russian thing. But even then, I think like Catholic is like one of the most famous one out there, right? Alongside some of the other ones. But you would think like the more mainstream ones would not be the one who's like saying that, okay, it's literally like, blood of the Christ and things like that. They would like say like, oh, this is spiritual. But no, that's not the case. Catholics basically believe that. Like, that's a surprising one, because I would always assume like the more bigger you are, the more like broad you are, the more under pressure you are in a way, the more you just have to like, okay, we're not saying it's literally blood of the Christ and things like that, but they're like, no, screw that, it is blood of the Christ, we believe what we believe. That's, I don't know, that's like somewhat respectable.
believe Christ is physically present in the Lord's Supper. And then all the churches above this line believe in apostolic succession, meaning they believe their church is the one true church with direct continuity to the apostles. That
Oh
means their
yeah.
priests were ordained by priests who were ordained by priests all the way going back to the apostles, and that's where their church gets its legitimacy from. So the apostolic succession churches are mainly just the Catholic churches, the Orthodox churches, and there's some Anglicans above this line. Anglicans have a very broad range, which I'm going to get into a bit later. So the reason the Orthodox are on the
Oh,
top
here we
is
go.
because they're the most strict about claiming to be the one true church. If you go into an Orthodox church, you'll
Really?
find icons of the saints plastered all over the walls. What that communicates is that this is the church with rootedness in the past. This is the church with direct continuity to the apostles. Whether or not you agree with that, that's what the Orthodox are trying to communicate. And that's why they're the most, like, tradition-centered branch of Christianity. They're all about keeping everything the same, keeping the same practices alive, the practices that they claim go all the way back to the apostles. Now, Catholics also do claim to be the one true church, but for Catholics, it's more about the church's authority than the church's rootedness in tradition. So that's why Catholics are
Yeah,
a little bit more open
Vatican.
to changing things than the Orthodox are, and Catholics are a little bit more open minded to other types of Christians like Protestants, especially after the Second Vatican Council. Now, for Anglicans, it's weird because some Anglicans seem more Catholic.
So I guess Catholic would make sense, like going past like even the king's time, having that kind of influence, right? Like Pope and everything. It's more of like a Catholic acts more like a government than most anything, right? Orthodox like being like too hardcore, it kind of makes sense, right? Like the more they believe strongly in it, they believe they are the true one, right? If you see them doing that thing, it just makes sense. Like, okay, look at that. It's like, what is this from 10th century or something? But yeah, with the Catholic is like, yeah, they are the tradition is mostly like about power as well, Pope, Vatican, and everything.
And some seem more Protestant. The reason for this is the Anglican Church kind of developed out of a struggle between Catholics and Protestants, and you can kind of see the remnants of that struggle today in Anglicanism. So that's why Anglicanism has such a broad range. Now, Lutherans are the only church fully between these two lines where they have a very, very high view of the sacraments, meaning baptism and the Lord's Supper, a more Catholic style view of the sacraments, but they have a more Protestant view of the church where they don't think any one institution or organization is the one true church. So they're
There you
Protestant
go.
in some way when it comes to salvation, how justification works, but they have a Catholic sounding view of the sacraments. Of course, they would say it's not a Catholic view, but sometimes Lutherans refer to themselves as evangelical Catholics for this reason. So now we
Hmm.
get to our Presbyterians. Traditional Presbyterian churches, they look a lot simpler because the Reformation did simplify like church architecture because it was less about the church. It's less high church and more about your own personal relationship with God, but not nearly as low church as a lot of modern evangelical churches. When I say traditional Presbyterian churches look beautiful like this, I mean traditional Presbyterian churches, because modern church architecture is ugly all across the board, because ugliness is one of the spiritual poisons of modernity, and I think the church needs to be a place of beauty to fight that.
I mean, why our modern structures suck, right? I mean, again, then it just like depends on what you mean, right? Like if you can have a flamboyant color, like some bright red color and everything, you would look good. But then again, people just like, what are you doing? What is this too much? And they just wear something like gray or silver, sophisticated suit. Today's structure is more like technology oriented. Like something will be just something that just flexes, but it's also simpler. Back then, it was just more beautiful, right? And I think there's also more layers about that. That kings and people just can just spend money compared to like most democracies, right? They can justify the money. I don't care. Like just do it because I'm king, right? Even though I understand like king won that much infallible or something, they still have to answer. But certain things like spending, I'm pretty sure they didn't have to bitch about it. In democracies, it's like Congress is gonna, what you talking about? This much, like shut up type of thing. And nowadays, like churches, I'm pretty sure they have their own income, but they all because of like this today's world like is mostly democratic. Yeah, there are like many dictator type of places. Mostly the view of the modern world is democratic, so churches work the same way as well, right? In some sense, so they'll see it in the same way, like why spend this much money, this and that. So modern thing are like easier, more simpler, but also technological. But overall it's just like not something like massive marble and god knows what that would takes a lot of long time to build. It's just going to be look like something like Taj Mahal or something. It's not going to do that.
Methodists and Congregationalists are in a similar place to Presbyterians. There's a lot of overlap. I would say Methodists and Congregationalists, especially Congregationalists, are a bit more low church than Presbyterians because they didn't exactly come from the Reformation itself. They came mostly from the Great Awakening and maybe the Puritan era, which came a bit after the Reformation, where people were shifting in an even more low church direction, even more away from the traditional religious institutions and more towards a personal relationship. Presbyterian and Congregationalist, those titles refer to the structure of the church government, and by definition, Congregationalist is a less authoritative, traditional, structured way to govern the church. Congregationalism has basically every church act as sort of an independent body. But then when we get lower than that, we get our Baptists. And for Baptist churches, the church really just functions as a fellowship of individual believers. So that's why there's not much of an emphasis on the church as an institution. There's emphasis on the Bible and your personal salvation. That's where the emphasis lies. But Baptist churches are still formal. And that's the only real thing that differentiates them from non-denominationals. In non-denominational churches, there's basically no formality, no sacredness, no ritual, because they sort of think that all gets in the way of your personal relationship with God. They seem to want church to be as
Makes sense.
casual as possible. Okay, now let's put some people on the compass. John MacArthur is an example of a very conservative Baptist. R.C. Sproul is a conservative Presbyterian. Tim Keller is also Presbyterian, but a lot less conservative. C.S. Lewis is really in the center of the compass, which is why people of all different Christian traditions have appreciated him, because he's not too far
Wait a minute, are these one of those, like I just said, like those you know pastors or whatever, like with the big ass, super churches or whatever that is, right?
from anyone. Jordan Cooper is a pretty conservative Lutheran. Doug Wilson is a very conservative Presbyterian, but he's a lot more high church than some others. Trent Horn's a conservative Catholic YouTuber. Bishop Robert Barron's a famous Catholic YouTuber and bishop.
Oh, these are
Richard Rohr
YouTubers.
is an example of a very liberal Catholic. I'd say he's liberal to the point of denying the essentials of Christianity. And there are even liberal Orthodox people. David Bentley Hart is in the Orthodox tradition, and he wrote a book advocating universalism, which is basically saying everyone's going to make it to heaven eventually, no matter what. But generally speaking, most Orthodox people are very conservative. So an example of a famous Orthodox priest is Father Josiah Trenum. He's a YouTuber and stuff. And not all Baptists are conservative either. Gavin Ortland still leans pretty conservative, but he's a lot less conservative than someone like John MacArthur, and I'm personally a very huge fan of Gavin Ortland. And there are examples of very liberal Baptists, at least theologically liberal. The most famous example is, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Ah,
He was a Baptist minister, but he was very theologically liberal. I mean, that's not an insult because most of the founding fathers were also very theologically liberal, and most non-denominational megachurch pastors like Joel Osteen would fall somewhere around here. So now I'm going to explain what theologically liberal and theologically conservative really mean. So it's not perfect because there's
all right. One thing I hate that liberal just means denying something of true self. Like that's not what really liberal means, but that's how it has become now, right? Like anything when you say liberal, like whatever it represents, it no longer reflects this. Like at that point, what's the meaning of anything, right? Like he said, like someone is too liberal, like Christian, like he's denying all the fundamental of Christianity. Why call yourself Christian at this point? Like, what are you doing? But this reflects in government in many places, right? I'm more liberal than conservative, but whenever I see shit like this is not liberal. Like you're so left, you're not even in the realm of liberal anymore, right? I don't know.
a lot of factors, but generally everyone to the left of this line is at least okay with people believing in evolution or at least not being strictly young earth creationist. Everyone to the left of this line is okay with female pastors. Everyone to the left of this line is LGBTQ affirming in the church.
That doesn't
And
make sense.
this line is where you get into actual heresy, meaning
LGBTQ in Christianity. How does that work? How does that work with Bible at all? I don't know, man.
denying the essentials of the faith, like some people denying the Trinity or denying the resurrection of Christ or denying that Jesus is
What
God.
the fuck? Oh wait a minute, it's like understand like denying Trinity. You don't you're not with the Trinity. Okay, I guess like some of the other churches can I guess say that like having different view of Trinity. Not believe in Christ being a God. Okay, I'm pretty sure like some churches or somebody like kind of makes sense. If you believe in that, I understand. But if you don't believe that Christ was resurrected, what is Christianity? What? I think that's like the most important. Okay, Christ wasn't resurrected. So why is it Christianity? What are you? How can you call yourself a Christian if you don't believe in Christ was resurrected? Like, what are you doing at this point? That is one of the stupidest thing I ever heard. At that point, it's just not a heresy or liberal. At this time, it's just stupid.
Trinity or denying the resurrection of Christ or denying that Jesus is God. So now I'm going to go over the
Jesus
specific
not God didn't
Presbyterian
rose up. So
denominations
what are you
because
doing?
I'm Presbyterian and those are the ones I know about. I'd love to do it for all of them, but I simply don't know enough. So maybe if you could give me some information, maybe I could make a part 2 about this. But yeah, the different specific denominations within these traditions are often divided from liberal to conservative,
All
splitting
right.
over issues like gay marriage or women's ordination. So the biggest and the mainline Presbyterian denomination is, of course, the PCUSA, and it has the broadest range from liberal to conservative. This is my denomination, so I'd probably be right over here at the very conservative end of the PCUSA. We also have some radically liberal people in the PCUSA who, like, don't believe the resurrection was a literal thing, and we also have people that are very similar to PCA because there is a little bit of overlap. So the PCA is the second biggest denomination. It is a conservative
Oh, now I kind of get it what they come from. Just like how they don't say like it's literal gods, but they're like, okay, no human can look. Basically, all were human. There are no god. There were no gods. They are all human. So obviously, a human cannot be resurrected. Probably died. So Jesus didn't really rose up, and yeah, this is all just spiritual. Basically, they treat Christianity as a therapy center. Nothing is literal. This is just like spiritual. Basically, when they say spiritual, it just means like something. Even though it's not real, you're just gonna believe in it because it's something to focus on and something to center on. So basically, it's like a therapy. You're describing therapy, man. There are many therapies in the world. You don't need a religion if you want that. But don't just call yourself a Christian at the same time you deny all the main things of it. That makes no sense, man. I'm sorry, I can't like wrap my head around it. Okay, I get it. Like Christians are like really broad. They were born into Christianity, so it's just like their thing. And since they believe in like obviously they believe in science and just deny anything that doesn't make sense science way. I understand that. I'm a very scientific guy. But at the same time, if you're gonna do all of that, don't call yourself Christian. If you just want a therapy and just want like a group type of thing, there are many other alternatives. But you can't call yourself Christian and just deny the main things. That doesn't make sense. It's in the name, Christ, Christian. Come on.
Offshoot denomination. It also has a pretty big range, but generally it's less traditional than the PCUSA. It looks a lot more contemporary. They don't value the sacraments quite as much, but there is always overlap between all of these. Then there's ECO, and I really like ECO because ECO is basically just the conservative slice of the
Oh,
PCUSA that kind of
evangelicals.
split off. And I do go to an ECO church a lot of the time when I'm at school instead of home. So yeah, ECO is pretty cool. Then you have the EPC, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, which is very diverse in terms of style. You'll have some very high church EPC churches and some very low church and even kind of charismatic EPC churches. Then you have the OPC, which is a very small and very conservative denomination. And the reason for this is they're very retreatist and isolationist. They basically just focus on having pure doctrines and they don't want to unify with anyone else who doesn't.
That makes way too much sense. Conservative not really needing something like conservatives don't like government that much. Don't like rules or any specific like boundaries. Freedom as a freedom can be. So I can understand like no church is gonna tell me anything. It's just mostly spiritual. I believe in Bible, nothing else. Like no church is gonna have any authority. Makes sense. So being in low authority, low church while being strong conservative kind of makes sense.
Then there's the RPCNA, a very, very small and old denomination that is extremely strict about adhering to not just all the Reformed beliefs, but all the Reformed traditions as well, and that's why they're a bit more traditional than the OPC. Now I'm going to go over the things I didn't go over before. The Oriental Orthodox churches are probably up here, very similar to Orthodox, but not quite as strict, always about being the one true church. The Pentecostals would probably be down here, very unstructured, low church approach, and they also don't do infant baptism, so they're overlapping the Baptists and non-denominationals. The Nazarene Holiness churches are probably here in between the Methodists and Pentecostals, which makes sense because their history is them arising out of the Methodist tradition, and then the Pentecostals arose out of them, so it makes sense for them to be in
Okay.
between. And if you're wondering where I'm going to put the Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses or
Oh yeah.
Seventh-day Adventists or Church of Christ, those aren't branches of historic Christianity, so they wouldn't go on here. They're not branches of the
Damn.
Christian family tree. They were started from scratch.
If you're wondering when I'm gonna put all this like 7 day Adventist, whatever that is, right? What the other name I forgot that those one that like Jehovah's Witness. Okay, Jehovah's Witness and Mormons. They don't belong here, son. Like, whoa, damn, that's cold.
Claiming to be rebuilding the Christianity that had been
Where's about
lost for
your
hundreds
damn?
and hundreds of years. So it wouldn't make sense to put them on a graph of Christian branches. Alright guys, that's about it for this video. If you
Okay.
have some corrections or comments, I'd love to hear about it in the comment
Did
section.
you see that
If you
emphasis?
guys want me to
Correction.
do a part 2 where I talk about other things, I will.
Yeah, corrections. Yeah, okay. Okay, somebody still tell me like who are those like super churches people? Is there any specific denomination? Is all of them? Because those super churches just made me think like what the fuck, didn't see that coming by a mile away. I didn't know like there was like an arena level churches where people gather, right? Super churches in this pastors like it's just like damn, it's just like people just gather from all around the place just to like what is that 200,000, 100,000? I don't even know the number, but it's like big ass number, like rows and rows of seats. Like that was a scary thing. Like, is it like some very specific like evangelical churches from one of the denomination, or you can find that type of thing with all the denomination? I don't know. But yeah, this was a good list, man. This is like a good concept, like liberal, conservative, high church, low church. Yeah, Orthodox, obviously, like you would know, just like, okay, anybody like doesn't know, would like, okay, this is probably going to be one of the most like hardcore type of thing. Catholic, I would not think it, but like government type of thing, like I said, makes sense. Yeah, all of this kind of makes sense, right? Anglican, I don't know. I thought I would have thought the Anglican would be a bit lower than its position, just below Catholics. Like, okay, I guess I didn't see that coming, but makes sense. Are killing me. Anglicans, I'm pretty sure, like, was created, because, like, they didn't want to agree with Catholics or something. So it kind of makes sense being close to that. But yeah. Well, if you like my next, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.